My name is Lydia Stone, and I learned the hard way that peace sometimes sounds like a setup. It happened on a Friday night that looked perfect, too perfect, maybe. The kind of evening that makes you forget life can turn without warning. The air smelled of rosemary and roasted garlic. Jazz floated through the house, low and velvety, like a secret. My husband, Richard, had just signed what he called his final mountain and $8 million logistics contract that would complete the $25 million fortune he built from nothing. We'd been married for 30 years, and in that time I'd seen him fight through markets, bankruptcies, and boardroom betrayals. But that night his eyes carried something different, quiet. Relief, maybe. He sat across from me, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled to his elbows, the amber light from the chandelier softening the lines around his mouth. For once there was no phone vibrating, no talk of shipments or accounts, just us and the hum of the saxophone. When dessert arrived, a simple lemon tart he always loved, he leaned back in his chair and smiled at me in that slow, deliberate way he did when his mind was already 3 steps ahead. "Lydia," he said gently, "I need you to do something for me." I looked up. "Anything? Transfer everything to your account? All of it?" I laughed, thinking he was teasing. "All of it? You mean the joint account?" He shook his head, still smiling, but his tone stayed calm. "No, everything. The houses, the investments, the company's cash reserve. Just to be safe." The way he said it, soft, measured, made the air tilt a little. "Richard, you sound like one of those doomsday planners. What's going on?" He reached across the table, his hand warm against mine. "It's not panic, sweetheart. It's protection. Some things are shifting at work. I don't want to explain yet, not until I'm sure. You're the one person I trust to keep it steady if anything happens." That word "if" hung between us longer than the music. Richard had been cautious since his mild stroke 5 years ago, so I didn't press. I forced a smile. "All right, I'll handle it first thing tomorrow, but only because you asked so nicely." He chuckled, the sound light, familiar. "Good, and now we don't talk business again tonight. Promise?" I nodded. "Promise." We moved to the kitchen barefoot, letting the music follow us. The tile was cool beneath my feet, his hand warm at my back. We danced slowly, laughing when he stepped on my toes. The years fell away in that moment. Just 2 people who had once built a dream from nothing. Later, as I washed the dishes, I caught him watching me. His eyes were soft, almost memorizing. "What?" I asked, smiling. He shook his head. "Nothing. You've always been the safe one." At the time, I thought he meant careful. I didn't know he meant guardian. If I had, I might have danced longer. The next morning felt ordinary, almost too calm. Sunlight poured through the kitchen windows, bouncing off the marble counter where 2 half-empty wine glasses still stood from the night before. Richard left early, kissing my forehead before grabbing his keys. "Don't forget to rest today," he said with that soft authority I used to tease him about. I smiled. "You say that like you'll actually come home before dark." He grinned. "This time I will." He didn't. By mid-morning I had finished the transfers, every document, every digital signature, every confirmation sent to the bank. The process felt strangely impersonal, as though I was moving puzzle pieces in a game I didn't fully understand. When it was done, I texted Richard a photo of the completed transfer receipt with a small heart emoji. He replied with a thumbs up and wrote, "Perfect, see you tonight." That message would become the last normal thing he ever said to me. Sunday evening came with an eerie quiet. I set the table for 2 out of habit, lighting the candle he liked, the one that smelled faintly of cedar and tobacco. By 8 o'clock, the food had gone cold. I snapped a picture of his empty plate and texted, "I'm eating your share." He answered minutes later, still at the office, "Save me some pie." I smiled at the screen, not knowing I'd read that line again and again like a prayer. When the phone rang at 9:17 p.m., I expected it to be him. Instead, a calm voice said, "Mrs. Stone, this is County General Hospital. Your husband has been brought in. You should come quickly." The words didn't land at first. The coffee mug slipped from my hand, shattering against the tile. It's strange how peace can vanish in a sentence. The drive blurred into rain, red lights, and half-formed prayers. I don't remember traffic or turns, only the sound of my own breathing, shallow and uneven. Somewhere between my front porch and the hospital entrance, I stopped being a wife waiting for dinner and became a woman waiting for truth. Hospitals have a strange kind of silence, half grief, half routine. When I stepped through the glass doors of County General, everything smelled of antiseptic and rain. A nurse met me at reception. "Mrs. Stone?" she asked softly. I nodded, barely finding my voice. She led me down a long hallway that buzzed faintly under fluorescent lights. My shoes squeaked with every step. When we reached a curtained room, she paused. "The doctor will explain everything." Inside, the world stopped moving. Richard lay motionless on the bed, pale against the sheets. The monitors were silent. No rhythmic beeping, no pulse line, just stillness. The doctor's voice broke through it, calm but distant. "Your husband suffered cardiac arrest in his office. Paramedics worked on him for over 20 minutes. We did everything we could." Those words always sound the same, final. I sat beside him, my hand trembling as I touched his. It was cold, unnaturally cold. "I'm here," I whispered. "You can rest now." I don't know how long I sat there before the nurse came back. She hesitated, eyes downcast. "For what it's worth, Mrs. Stone, your husband wasn't alone when he collapsed. Someone was already there." My heart stumbled. "Who?" She looked uncertain. "I believe it was your son. Brandon, right? Security said he called for help before the paramedics arrived." "Brandon, my son, my only child." I nodded numbly, unsure what to say. The nurse left quietly. A few minutes later, I heard the elevator doors open at the end of the corridor. When I turned, Brandon was there with Sophie beside him. I stood, relieved. "Oh, thank God." But he didn't move toward me. His expression was unreadable, rehearsed. "Mom," he said evenly, "we need to talk about Dad's accounts." For a second, I couldn't process the words. "What?" "Our lawyer's here. We just need to make sure everything's handled correctly." Behind him, a man in a navy suit stepped forward, carrying a briefcase. He nodded politely. The air went still. My husband's body was barely cold, and my son was already talking about money. The funeral came too quickly, wrapped in polished sympathy. The estate grounds were immaculate white lilies, dark suits, polite whispers. People said Brandon was so strong for his mother. They didn't see how he avoided my eyes. He stood beside Sophie, accepting condolences like a man at a corporate event, not a graveside. I didn't cry. My tears had turned into confusion. 2 days earlier, Richard and I had been laughing over dinner. Now he was in a mahogany coffin that matched his old office desk. The wind was sharp, unseasonably cold for spring. I kept thinking he'd hate this weather. After the service, I slipped away to the veranda for air. The sound of the wind through the trees felt more honest than the voices inside. That's when I overheard 2 guests whispering nearby. "They argued again that night," one said. "About ownership. He wanted to take over, but Mr. Stone said no." The words cut through the cold like a blade. They were talking about Brandon. Later that evening, when most guests had gone, I sat near the fireplace, staring into the dying flames. That's when the housekeeper brought a visitor, Mr. Lowell, Richard's personal lawyer. His hat was damp from the rain. "Mrs. Stone," he said quietly, "I'm sorry to intrude. May I have a moment of your time?" I led him into Richard's study. The room still smelled like him, cedar, leather, faint cologne. His reading glasses rested exactly where he'd left them. Mr. Lowell placed a leather folder on the desk. "Your husband trusted me with many things, but he trusted you most. He asked me to deliver this in the event of his passing." He handed me a sealed envelope. Across the front, in Richard's familiar handwriting, it read, "For Lydia. Only if I'm gone." My fingers shook as I opened it. Inside was a single page, written in his steady, deliberate hand. "Lydia, if you're reading this, then the quiet I feared has arrived. I saw too much and said too little. Protect what we built. Don't let them rewrite the books. You were always the safe one." I read the note twice, then again. Every word carried the same weight as his voice that night. Just to be safe. Now I understood. He hadn't been paranoid. He'd been preparing me. The following Monday, I went with Mr. Lowell to the company headquarters. The glass building stood tall against the city skyline, 8 floors of Richard's ambition. The lobby receptionist recognized me immediately but avoided eye contact. Everyone did. Grief makes people polite in strange ways. They speak softly but say nothing of value. Mr. Lowell had arranged access to Richard's office under the pretense of collecting personal belongings. The hallway was quiet, carpets muffling every sound. When we reached the door that still read Richard Stone, founder CEO, I hesitated. My reflection looked like a stranger's tired eyes, pressed lips holding too much silence. Inside, everything was frozen in time. His pen rested beside a half-finished glass of water. A jacket hung neatly on the back of the chair. Even the faint scent of his cologne lingered. But the calm in that room felt wrong, too controlled, too staged. The janitor, a kind older man named Raphael, appeared at the door. He had worked there for over a decade. Richard often called him the heartbeat of the building. "I didn't expect to see you here, Mrs. Stone," he said gently. "I needed to," I replied. "Were you here the night I stopped myself?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am. I was cleaning near the elevators around 8:30. I heard voices, Mr. Stone and Mr. Brandon. They were arguing." My pulse quickened. "You're sure it was my son?" He nodded again. He said something like, "You still don't trust me." Then there was a crash like glass breaking. A few minutes later, the door opened. Mr. Brandon walked out fast, didn't say a word, just stormed toward the elevators. "And, Richard?" "I thought he just needed space," Raphael said softly. "I never imagined," his voice trailed off. Mr. Lowell stepped closer. "Were there any other visitors that night?" Raphael thought for a moment. "Yes, Mrs. Sophie came earlier, around 7:30. She said she was dropping off dinner for her father-in-law. She didn't stay long." Mr. Lowell exchanged a look with me. "Do you remember the times exactly?" "Yes," Raphael said. "The cameras would show it." Minutes later, he led us to the security office. On the monitor, the digital log confirmed it. Sophie Stone, in, 7:31 p.m. out, 7:42 p.m. Brandon Stone, in, 8:18 p.m. out, 8:33 p.m. in again, 8:47 p.m. No recorded exit. I stared at the screen. Those numbers felt heavier than any words. Richard's final hour had been reduced to timestamps, and neither of them included me. 2 days later, Mr. Lowell and I met at County General to review Richard's medical file. Hospitals keep everything in neat columns: dates, doses, times, as if order can hide guilt. We sat in a small consultation room, waiting for the cardiac nurse assigned to Richard's care. Her name was Nancy Harper. When she entered, she looked exhausted, the kind of tired that comes from more than night shifts. Mr. Lowell greeted her gently. "Thank you for meeting us, Ms. Harper. We just have a few questions about Mr. Stone's treatment prior to his passing." Nancy nodded, fingers twisting the strap of her bag. "Of course." He slid a copy of the dosage chart across the table. We noticed a revision, same entry duplicated, but time-stamped 2 hours later. "Can you tell us why?" Her eyes flicked to the page, then away. It was a correction. I realized I'd entered the wrong dosage, so I fixed it. "Which entry was wrong?" Mr. Lowell asked calmly. "The first or the second?" She hesitated, voice barely audible. "The first." He leaned forward. "Then why wasn't the correction co-signed by the attending physician?" The silence stretched. Finally, she whispered, "Because I wasn't told to." "By whom?" Nancy swallowed hard. "Mrs. Sophie Stone called me that night. She said Mr. Stone had been feeling dizzy, restless. She asked me to review his chart remotely and fix any inconsistencies before the doctor noticed. Said she didn't want him embarrassed over another missed dose." My stomach tightened. "She asked you to alter a medical record?" Nancy's eyes filled with panic. She made it sound harmless. She said she was helping. I thought she's family. Mr. Lowell opened another folder and slid a page toward her. "And this payment," he said evenly, $40,000 from a consulting vendor 3 days before the revision. "Does that look familiar?" Her face went pale. I didn't know it was from them. It came through a third party. I thought it was a bonus." Mr. Lowell's tone stayed calm, but his words sharpened. "Do you understand the gravity of changing a dosage note for a cardiac patient who died 48 hours later?" Nancy broke down. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone." I looked at her, voice steady. "You didn't just hurt someone, you helped erase him." The room went silent. Mr. Lowell gathered the papers. "We'll file to reopen the case. The cause of death won't stay cardiac arrest. It'll read what it truly is, undetermined." A week later, the courthouse smelled like paper and tension. This wasn't a criminal hearing yet. It was a civil motion, Brandon's request to freeze the estate until questions of intent were resolved. To the court, it was procedure. To me, it was betrayal dressed in a suit. I sat beside Mr. Lowell, hands folded to keep them from shaking. Across the aisle, Brandon adjusted his tie, his face calm, almost detached. Sophie sat next to him, perfect posture, eyes trained on the table. They looked like a power couple attending a business meeting, not a hearing about a man's death. When the bailiff called the case, Brandon's lawyer rose first, tall, polished, voice dripping with confidence. "Your Honor, this case isn't about grief, it's about governance. The transfer of $25 million from Mr. Richard Stone's holdings into Miss Stone's personal account occurred less than 48 hours before his passing. We question whether Mr. Stone was of sound mind and free will when this was executed." Mr. Lowell stood next, calm as steady water. "Your Honor, my client's husband authorized those transfers voluntarily, documented and notarized. Every timestamp matches his location and his signature. The bank verified compliance. There is no evidence of coercion, only of caution." The opposing lawyer smiled faintly. "And yet we have no witnesses, no medical clearance, no board approval. Unusual, don't you think?" Mr. Lowell didn't blink. Unusual doesn't mean unlawful. Mr. Stone was securing his assets against internal misuse. The judge leaned forward. "You're suggesting the deceased had reason to fear mismanagement?" "I'm suggesting he was right to," Mr. Lowell said evenly, "because within 12 hours of his death, his son, Mr. Brandon Stone, filed to seize control of those same accounts." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Brandon's jaw tightened. Sophie shifted in her seat. When it was my turn to speak, I rose slowly. "Your Honor," I said, keeping my voice steady, "my husband didn't move that money to control it. He moved it to protect it. He'd found discrepancies in the company ledgers. He trusted me to keep what we built safe." Sophie's fingers trembled slightly against her clutch. Then, just as the judge began to adjourn for recess, Mr. Lowell's phone buzzed. He glanced down, then looked at me. "The lab results are in," he whispered. I didn't need to ask what that meant. The truth had finally arrived, and it was lethal. The toxicology report changed everything. Richard's blood contained traces of chloral derivative, an old-fashioned sedative, nearly undetectable in small doses, but deadly when combined with cardiac medication. The official cause of death was amended from natural cardiac arrest to undetermined, triggering a full criminal investigation. Detective Moreno, a calm woman with tired eyes, handled the case. She spoke with the precision of someone who had seen too much. "Mrs. Stone," she told me, "the pattern is clear. The payments, the call logs, the dosage edits, it all points to a coordinated effort. We just need a confession to connect the dots." That confession came faster than anyone expected. Nurse Nancy Harper broke first. She admitted everything: the phone call, the payment, the fear. In her statement, she said she'd been contacted not once, but twice, the second time by Brandon himself. He wanted her to make sure the change looked routine. By the time the detectives visited Sophie, she was already waiting with a suitcase. She didn't fight. She didn't cry. She just said quietly, "He told me it would be quick." When the arrests were made, the news spread fast. Local hair and wife indicted in death of business magnate. The headlines made my stomach twist. I didn't feel victory, only a strange, exhausted relief. The courtroom that once felt like a battlefield now became a place of closure. Brandon was charged with fraud, tampering with evidence, and involuntary manslaughter. Sophie faced charges of bribery and obstruction. During sentencing, the judge asked if I had anything to say. I stood, voice low but clear. My husband believed in building things that last. Trust, work, family. What happened wasn't just about money, it was about destroying the very things he stood for. I'm here today because he prepared me to stand when everything else fell apart. The judge nodded slowly. "You kept your promise, Mrs. Stone." Brandon was sentenced to 18 years, Sophie to 15. After the verdict, I returned home to silence. The same house where we danced in the kitchen, where rosemary still grew by the window. I sat at the dining table, the evening light fading gold across the glass. For the first time since Richard's death, I didn't feel fear. Only quiet. Only peace. Justice, it turns out, doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers through the walls of an empty house. Weeks passed, and the house slowly began to feel alive again. I started opening the curtains in the mornings, letting the sunlight spill across the hardwood floors. The silence that once pressed on my chest now felt softer, like a friend who understood. I kept Richard's study exactly as it was: the books, the jacket on the chair, the glass paperweight he'd bought in London. Sometimes I'd sit there with a cup of tea, reading his old notes. They weren't about business anymore. They were about balance, legacy, and the kind of peace that can't be bought. One afternoon, I found the watch he used to wear tucked inside the desk drawer. I hadn't noticed it before. The engraving on the back read, "For Lydia, my safe place." I smiled through tears. After everything, the lies, the courtroom, the betrayal, his words still carried me home. People often ask how I managed to survive it all. The truth is, I didn't survive because I was brave. I survived because I listened. Richard had warned me in the only way he knew how, and I finally understood what he meant by safe. It wasn't about money or property. It was about trust, about knowing when to stand your ground, even when your own family tries to move it beneath your feet. I've learned that peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the quiet that follows justice. Before I end my story, let me say this: if you've ever had to protect what's yours, or stand alone when the people closest to you turned away, you're not weak, you're simply awake. Tell me where you're watching from, and if my story reminds you of someone you love, like, share, and subscribe to The Art of Revenge. Because sometimes, justice doesn't roar, it breathes in silence, waiting for someone brave enough to hear it.